The most ridiculous thing in my toolbox, a curved 10mm wrench, might have come with the car. Because honestly, there's no other way to secure the upper radiator hose where Jaguar's designers decided it should go. In today's video, I'll show you how I fixed a leaking coolant pipe buried in the most painfully awkward spot, right between the engine and the radiator. But first, big thanks to Andy. He gifted me this set of coolant pipes, and I really appreciate it. So, let's get it started. I started the repair by getting under the car and draining coolant from the radiator. First, I loosened the drain plug to get it ready for removal. Then, I placed a bottleneck funnel into the subframe hole, right in line with the drain point. After setting a plastic can underneath, I inserted the funnel into it and fully removed the drain plug to let the coolant flow out. The only thing left to do under the car was to reinstall the drain plug, just to avoid getting back under later. So I tightened the plug using a large flathead screwdriver and moved on with the rest of the repair in the engine bay. I removed the 3 screws holding the engine cover, took it off, and set it aside. Next, I unfastened and removed the clamp on the throttle body hose, then unplugged the MAP sensor. After that, I unscrewed 2 bolts securing the airbox retaining bracket and removed the bracket along with the airbox. That's when I finally got a clear view of the leaking upper radiator hose. I unplugged the ignition coils, then used an 8mm socket to remove the bracket holding the pipe in place. I unscrewed one more hidden fastener, the one I've been using as a replacement for the torn-out captive nut on the plastic coolant pipe. Once the bracket was removed, I had better access to the coolant line. I grabbed the clamp with pliers and swung it aside. Next, I moved to the other side, where the pipe is attached to the T-part with a retaining spring clip. I used a screwdriver to carefully pry it off from where it belongs. And that's when I could finally remove the leaking pipe. As you can see, it was a bit of a mess. The captive nut was torn out, the pipe had been glued multiple times, and the gasket end was all hacked up. It was definitely the right time to change it. The new gifted pipe came just in time. It was slightly pre-used, but evidently not for long. I'd already given it a thorough clean, so I got straight to installing it. I inserted the pipe into the T-shaped housing and secured it with a spring clip. I couldn't clearly film it since the clip installs from underneath, but you can surely hear the click when it snaps into place. I slipped the rubber hose onto the other end of the pipe, then moved on to reinstalling the bracket that holds it in place. That part was tricky. The bolt goes in from underneath, and the bracket itself is secured with 2 nuts to the engine head cover. So I flipped the process. First, I attached the pipe to the bracket, since the bolt inserts from below, and only then mounted the bracket onto the engine. I can only imagine what went into that design decision. Finally, I threaded the bolt into the captive nut and slid the bracket onto the 2 studs on the engine head cover. I put the 2 8mm nuts onto the studs and tightened them down with a socket. With the pipe in place and no plans to move it again, I grabbed the pliers and slid the clamp along the hose to secure the connection. And here's where that curved 10mm wrench really came in handy. I believe it's better to tighten the pipe securing bolt with the pipe already in place. That way it gets attached at the proper angle, which would be next to impossible if I tried to attach the pipe to the bracket before reinstalling it. Not to mention doing it without draining the cooling system first.
TEKNOLOGIA! 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 TEKNOLOGIA!
After the pipe was installed, it was time to reconnect the ignition coils. By the way, do you see this airbox bushing? I found it for free here in the engine bay. And if you want to know more about it, check out my video on Jaguar X-type airbox modifications. I'll leave the link here and in the description below. I dropped the airbox back into place. You know I don't bother with the 2 inner screws. That lets me install and remove it in one quick move. While I was at it, I poured some coolant into the reservoir so it could start flowing into the system while I finished up the airbox installation. By this time, night had fallen, so I had to switch to night mode to keep filming. I figured it's better to finish the job now than put it off until the next day. I secured the airbox with its retaining bracket, tightening the 2 bolts with a big flathead screwdriver. Then I clamped the throttle body hose back on with pliers and plugged in the MAF sensor. The only thing left to do was bleed the cooling system. I started the engine, gave it some revs, and topped up the coolant as the air bubbles worked their way out. A bit messy, but job done.